3135, contact New York Center.
The World Trade Center, tower number 1 is on fire. The whole outside of the building was just a huge explosion.
The worst thing for me was just being able to do nothing but watch it go on.
One report said, and we can't confirm any of this, that a plane may have hit one of the 2 towers of the World Trade Center.
September 11, 2001, 8:46 a.m. American Airlines Flight 11 crashes into the North Tower of the World Trade Center.
People are jumping out the windows.
As confusion reigns in lower Manhattan, another plane, United Airlines Flight 175, is at cruising altitude 50 miles northwest of New York City.
United 175 now comes up on my frequency, and now I am tracking him.
But the next 17 minutes bring confusion and fear for the crew and passengers on board.
There's blood in the aisles. There are dead people.
17 minutes that touch the lives of all involved with Flight 175.
He told me that he thought a stewardess had been killed.
What I saw was a giant aircraft come in eye contact, eye level towards me.
17 minutes that are the ultimate challenge for the men charged with keeping the skies safe.
At that point, I got very scared because I realize now that this is something that we have never seen before.
17 minutes that will become a turning point in history. (6 a.m., September 11, 2001. As the day's first flights take to the skies, controllers are working the morning shift at Boston Air Route Traffic Control Center in Nashua, New Hampshire. Among them, John Hartling, a 25-year veteran who used to handle air traffic in the Air Force.
That morning I got to work at 6:30. It was a normal time. And the mood was quiet. It was a Tuesday morning, beautiful morning.
Boston Center controls most high-altitude airplanes over the eastern states into New York. Close to 6,000 flights are routed through Boston Center each day. For air traffic controllers like Hartling, keeping thousands of planes moving safely and on time is a delicate balancing act. The stakes are high and the pressure unrelenting. This morning, it seems like business as usual.
It was somewhat busy that morning. A little bit after 8, and you get a lot of departures out of Boston.
And you take that 04 Sierra Romeo, right?
Around 8:25 a.m., after working planes for more than an hour, Hartling gets some disturbing news. An American flight is acting erratically.
One of the controls from another area was standing behind me as well as the supervisor, and they said, "We think there's something wrong with this aircraft. I believe it's hijacked."
As Hartling and the other controllers watch, the plane, headed from Boston to Los Angeles, goes silent, then makes a sudden and unexpected turn to the southeast.
I've never experienced anything like this, but it was a situation where, as air traffic controllers, can talk to airplanes. We have control. They're going to do what we tell them to do. And we felt at that particular point we had no control over anything.
An hour earlier, at 7:20 a.m., things seem perfectly normal for United Flight 175, scheduled to depart at 8 a.m. from Boston to Los Angeles. Flight attendant Robert Fangman is running late and arrives just in time to greet passengers.
He really almost missed it and got in there, checked out his surroundings to see, okay, who's on the plane this morning. He loved people. He loved meeting people. He just was a very open, kind-hearted soul that was drawn to people.
He jumped on and off planes like we would jump on and off a bus. He took such a big cut in pay just to do what he loved, and he was so happy about it.
Also looking forward to flying that morning is marketing executive Peter Hansen. Peter, his wife Sue, and their 2.5-year-old daughter Christine are all on Flight 175, seated in rows 19C, D, and E. It will be Christine's first plane ride.
Peter had business trip to make, and Sue decided to go along. as a vacation to see her family and bring Christine to see the family. They were so together, a unit of one. Just a lovely, lovely feeling when you were with them because you knew that there was so much love that they had for each other.
Seated a few rows in front of the Hansons in 15A is 38-year-old Brian Sweeney. Sweeney, a defense contractor and former Navy Top Gun pilot, is heading to LA on business and has taken Flight 175 several times before.
He had his standard, Sweeney uniform on, his jeans and his denim shirt and his baseball cap, and that's how he traveled, and it's just who he was.
He loved life. He was a very, very proud American. He was a born leader, and he showed that in many ways.
His last words to me were, "I love you and I'll see you Thursday." Like we do every day when we say goodbye to people, you just don't even think twice about it.
Also boarding Flight 175 that morning is 23-year-old Marwan Al-Shehi, who is in first class, seated in 6C. For Al-Shehi, this will be anything but a routine flight.
Marwan Al-Shehi places a call at Logan Airport to the other hijacking team, which was headed by Mohammed Atta.
Presumably their last conversation before they each boarded their separate aircraft. I think the purpose of the phone call was to let Atta know that Shehi was in position and ready to go.
Well, Mohammed Atta was also flying to Los Angeles that morning from Boston's Logan Airport, but he was aboard a different flight, Flight American 11, which was scheduled to leave like 175 around 8 o'clock that morning.
Al-Shehi and his 4 companions passed through security without incident. Al-Shehi is from the United Arab Emirates. So too is Fayez Bani Hamad. Both Hamza and Ahmed Al-Ghamdi, as well as Mohan Al-Shehri, are from Saudi Arabia. The 4 so-called muscle hijackers are not at all physically imposing. Most are under 5'7", but they all have practiced how to kill by using knives to slit the throats of camels.
They carried knives. The knives were acceptable by FAA standards. They were utility knives, apparently. None of these guys were even selected for additional screening. They just walked through.
Al-Shehi and his men, like the other hijackers that morning, were dressed in Western-style clothes, were neatly coiffed, and basically looked as innocuous as they could.
Al-Shehi's men are scattered around him in seats 2A, 2B, 9C, and 9D. Positions deliberately chosen for strategic importance. Most importantly, it places them a short distance from the cockpit.
The door to the cockpit, the requirement was before the airplane moves, it's supposed to be locked. The problem is the door can be kicked in.
Well, this was a commando-style operation, so everything was planned and deliberate. The plan was to have it happen in seconds.
They were soldiers. I mean, they saw what they were doing as a military mission. They knew they were going to die.
At 7:58 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175, a Boeing 767 packed with over 11,000 gallons of jet fuel, pushes back from the gate. 56 passengers and 9 crew members are on board.
I just had a bad feeling. Something is going to happen. It's not going to be good.
At 8:14 a.m., air traffic controllers at Boston's Logan Airport clear United 175 for takeoff, 14 minutes late. Ahead of 175 that morning is American Airlines 11, which took off at 8 o'clock.
And on board American 11 were Mohammed Atta and his team of hijackers.
As Flight 175 starts to climb, American 11 has just leveled off at 26,000 feet. Boston Air Traffic instructs Flight 11 to climb to 35,000 feet. There's no response.
Right after 8:14, the hijacking of American 11 begins. The muscle hijackers seated in the front storm the cockpit, somehow gain entry. More than likely they killed the pilot and co-pilot by slitting their throats, and then bring Mohammed Atta up to the front to fly the plane.
Air traffic controllers at Boston Center repeatedly try to reach Flight 11. There is no reply. Then, at 8:21 a.m., the transponder on Flight 11 abruptly shuts off.
Every airplane that flies in the United States and overseas has what is called a transponder on board. It's a discrete code that they can actually input in, which sends us a code back that we're allowed to track.
They had it apparently in their heads that they were going to make these airplanes invisible by doing this. Well, that's not true. They certainly make it more difficult for air traffic control to follow it.
And we could still keep a tag on them and follow the track of the aircraft. But we have no idea what his altitude is. And his last reported altitude, he was cleared to 29,000 feet, which is flight level 290.
I was always wondering if they had a small handheld GPS device on board which they were just able to input the coordinates of the city.
Even without that, it would have been a fairly simple thing to watch outside, make a turn to the south, the West Coast bound flights, and then start looking for the outline of New York City.
As air traffic in Boston Center, which has noticed that the transponder is off, has tried repeatedly to contact American 11, all of a sudden at about 8:24, they hear a suspicious transmission.
We have some planes. Just stay quiet and you'll be okay. We're returning to the airport.
The voice coming from Flight 11 is believed to be that of Mohammed Atta, who is piloting the plane.
He's trying to calm the passengers by telling them that this is a hijacking like all the others. Clearly they would have some demands, but they're going back to the airport and everything would be fine.
Nobody move. Everything will be okay. If you try to make any move, you'll injure yourself and the airplane. Just stay quiet.
What he was attempting to do was to talk to the passengers. You can tell that by what he said. But the fact was he transmitted it in the open on a radio frequency.
The pilots of United 175 were originally on the same frequency as American 11. So they actually heard all the transmissions being made by Atta at the time.
When you hear something weird on the radio as a pilot, and we do quite often, you may look at each other and go, what the heck was that? But unless there's something to link it to, you're probably not going to say anything more about it.
The pilots of United 175 don't report the suspicious transmission right away. But at Boston Center, alarm bells are going off. Air traffic controller John Hartling takes over tracking Flight 11.
Everybody in the facility kind of knew that there was something really wrong at this particular point. You got an American airliner at 29,000 feet. His transponder's not working, and he was flying at great speed, and he's not talking to anybody.
Boston Center now assumes Flight 11 has been hijacked. Normally in these situations, pilots would input a specific code.
And it blinks up and shows emergency on our radar scopes. And there's a code also they can put up there for hijack. And it shows and it reads hijack on our scope. But in this case, he just turned the transponder off, so we had no code at all.
At 8:38, the military liaison from Boston's FAA Center calls the Northeast Air Defense Sector in Rome, New York, and reports that there's a hijacking.
And I saw that it was the FAA line that was blinking. So I knew at that point, this really is a call from the FAA. And I picked up the line and identified myself to the Boston Center controller. And he said, he was very, he was kind of stumbling a bit. You could tell he was very concerned.
All right, Boston Center Team U, we have a problem here. We have a hijacked aircraft headed towards New York. And we need someone to scramble some F-16s or something up there to help us out.
Is this real world or exercise?
No, this is not an exercise, not a test.
At Otis Air Force Base in Massachusetts, 2 F-15 fighter pilots, codenamed Lieutenant Colonel Duff and Major Nasty, get orders to respond.
He said, it's Otis Tower, something about a hijacking. He said, this looks like the real thing.
Duff came in and said that there was a possible hijacking.
The fighter pilots are airborne and headed south within minutes. Around this time, United Flight 175 has just reached its cruising altitude.
Flight attendants may have started beverage service. At that point, the flight is fairly normal as far as the passengers are concerned.
I had asked United 175 how the weather was. And he told me he could see for miles and miles and miles. And I told him, I said, I want you to look at your 1, 2 o'clock and look at about 29,000 feet. Tell me if you see an American 767. And he came back. He said, yeah, I see him out there. He's southbound, and he's about that altitude, 29,000 feet. Well, I turned United. I said, United 175, turn 30 degrees to the right. I want to make sure I keep you away from this aircraft.
For any of us at any time and any part of airspace to be told, stay out of the way of another jetliner, what in the world is going on? That would raise all sorts of alarms in the minds of the pilots.
At 8:41 a.m., Hartling hands Flight 175 off to New York's Air Traffic Control Center, where controller Dave Battaglia takes over. Battaglia has been directing planes for more than 20 years.
United 175 now comes up on my frequency, and now I am tracking him. And his very first words are, we heard the threatening transmissions from American 11.
That would be 175's last transmission with the ground. The pilots of 175 have no idea that they are just moments away from the same fate.
We're looking for American 11. He is still flying, but he is heading southeastbound right towards New York City. And as he gets close to the city, we're wondering if he was going to be landing at one of the airports.
One of my fellow controllers on the other side of the room, I heard him say, that airplane's going to hit the World Trade Center.
At 8:46 a.m., American 11 suddenly disappears from radar.
I heard this sound that was a shriek and a roar. It was nothing I'd ever heard, certainly in Manhattan before. It sounded like a missile.
American 11 hit high up in the North Tower, around the 93rd floor, going a pretty astonishing rate of speed, almost 500 miles an hour. Obviously, people on board the plane and probably hundreds on the floors that were impacted were killed instantly.
Right after American 11's target disappears, numerous airplanes and pilots now are asking me, what is going on in Lower Manhattan? There is heavy smoke coming out of one of the towers of the Trade Center.
Everybody looked up at the same time. I remember a lot of people immediately running up the street below.
As chaos erupts on the ground, terror is unfolding in the skies.
And he said, Mom, I'm on a hijacked plane, and it doesn't look good.
The World Trade Center, tower number 1 is on fire. The whole outside of the building was just a huge explosion. Engine 1 out, World Trade Center, 1060. Send every available ambulance, everything you got to the World Trade Center now. Send them now, just so you know, this is confirmed. This is confirmed.
Most people thought, what a horrible accident. Some people thought it was a helicopter who hit the towers. Some people thought it was a small plane. It was, I think, almost inconceivable to people that it was a jumbo airliner on a transcontinental flight.
You know, one of the controllers come back and said, the airplane hit the World Trade Center. And then it started, at that particular time, things started to unravel.
We have a number of floors on fire. It looked like the plane was aiming towards the building. It looked like it was intentional. It's four more units going into the box. It could be a terrorist attack.
Sometime between the last transmission from the pilot at 175 at 8:42 and when American 11 impacted the tower at 8:46, the attack began aboard United 175.
Bonnie Hamid and El Sherry, as soon as the light went off, the seatbelt sign went off, they were up and in the cockpit before anybody knew what was going on.
The two muscle hijackers stormed the cockpit, somehow gained entry, stabbed the flight attendant. There are reports from 175 that occurred, and then assaulted the pilot and co-pilot.
Somebody bursting into the cockpit. Your first reaction is not going to be take off the seatbelt, turn around and lunge at them. Your first reaction is going to be to turn around and say, what are you doing here? Who are you?
The pilots are probably dead or at least incapacitated within minutes. And at that point, Marwan al-Shehhi would have gone into the cockpit and taken control of the flight.
The other two guys, the Ghamdis, push all the rest of the passengers and crew. Those were still alive. Apparently one of the flight crew was also slaughtered in the aisle. Pushed them back to the back of the aircraft. Shehhi takes over the plane.
At 8:47 a.m., United 175 is 50 miles northwest of New York City when its transponder code is suddenly changed.
As I look up, I notice that United 175's code has changed. I just turned around and radioed the pilot. My exact words were, United 175, recycle transponder squawk, in the code that he was supposed to be on. There was no response. At the time, still not a thing to be worried about.
Hijacker al-Shehhi obviously intended to turn off that transponder, but because he just changed codes and didn't turn it off, he still left the controllers with a very clear indication of the normal return from an aircraft that was squawking, that's what we call it, with the altitude.
People on the plane know something's gone wrong. Obviously, there's blood in the aisle. They're dead people. And some of them start calling their loved ones.
At 8:52 a.m., Peter Hansen calls his parents from an airphone in the back of the plane.
The phone rang. I answered it. And Peter said, Dad, the plane is being hijacked. And at first I thought to myself, he must be joking. Maybe he's just trying to fool me. But he said, no, Dad, he said, it's really the plane's being hijacked. He said, I think somebody's been stabbed. And I think the hijackers have taken over the cockpit because the plane is acting funny. He said, would you call United Airlines and let them know? And I said, well, are you okay? He said, yeah, I'm okay. I said, how's Christine? How's Sue? He said, they're okay, Dad. He said, but make the phone call. I said, okay. So I hung up.
At that very moment, a male flight attendant on Flight 175 calls United Airlines, also from the back of the plane. It is believed to be Robert Fangman.
The call went to the maintenance department because they had a certain number they would dial for emergencies, and that's where it would go to. Bob did tell the maintenance man that the plane had been hijacked, the pilots had been stabbed, and the flight attendant had been stabbed.
Now as I'm watching, United 175 makes a hard left-hand turn and starts climbing. Not only did he make a sharp turn, but he also climbed 3,000 feet in a matter of approximately 1 minute, which is a very fast rate of climb. This is something that we have never seen before. And I immediately turned to the manager of the facility and I said, I believe I just lost United 175.
Around 8:52, the fighters that have been scrambled from Otis Air Force Base are airborne, and they're headed over military airspace over the Atlantic Ocean.
So as we're climbing out, we go supersonic on the way, which is kind of non-standard for us and nasty. I even called me in the actuator and said, hey, Duff, you're super. And I said, yeah, I know. Don't worry about it.
We both knew that this was something real. Didn't know how bad it could be, but he just wanted to get there as fast as we could and then sort out the problem.
They know that their job is going to be to roll out behind this hijacker, to stay out of sight of the aircraft. You don't want to scare anybody, and just pull in 5 miles behind them and watch. That's all their orders are going to be.
Around 8:55 a.m., United 175 is now descending from the south over New Jersey when it has a near collision with a Delta flight.
The controller who was working the pilot of the Delta yells at him, take any evasive action necessary. We have an airplane, we don't know what he's doing, any action at all. This is stuff that's you would only see in the movies.
Shehhi wasn't a great pilot, but the flight paths that the plane took, and it's kind of all over the place. It's wobbling. Obviously, it was a rocky flight.
One of the things he did say to me was that the plane was flying very erratically and that people were very ill. They were throwing up and so forth.
At 8:59 a.m., Flight 175 passenger Brian Sweeney tries to call his wife Julie on an airphone from row 32. He leaves this message for her on the answering machine.
Jules, this is Ryan. Listen, on an airplane that's been hijacked, and things don't go well. I'm looking good. I just want you to know I absolutely love you. I want you to do good. So happy to find. Same to my parents and everybody. And I just totally love you, and I'll see you later. Hi, babe. Hope I call you.
The phone started ringing. I said hello, and I heard, Mom, this is Brian. And he sounded somewhat subdued. And I said, hey, Brian, what's up? And he said, Mom, I'm on a hijacked plane, and it doesn't look good. He started to tell me, he said, I don't know who these people are, and if they come, I may have to hang up right away.
With his training, I think there was no question in his mind that it was a terrorist attack and that he was going to die. Otherwise, he would have never picked up the phone and worried us for no reason.
Well, knowing Bob, I feel that he was doing his job, taking care of the people, making sure they were calm, and probably not giving much thought to himself at all.
The United 175, the hijackers were heading towards the city. We were counting down the altitudes, and they were descending right at the end at 10,000 feet per minute. That is absolutely unheard of for a commercial jet. It is unbelievable for the passengers in the back to withstand that type of force as they're descending. They're actually nosing the airplane down and doing it what I would call a power dive.
At 9:01 a.m., United 175 is hurtling at more than 400 miles per hour toward the Statue of Liberty and New York Harbor. A manager at New York Center calls the FAA's command center in Herndon, Virginia.
Yeah, several situations going on here. It's escalating big time. And we need to get the military involved with this. We're involved with something else. We have other aircraft that may have a similar situation going on here.
Toyota, your Camry connection. Burdick is your Toyota truck headquarters with 3.9% APR plus $2,000 off select Tacoma. Over 300 Toyotas, including the new Yaris and Prius. The smart way to keep moving forward. Your Camry connection. Burdick Toyota in North Syracuse. Check out driversvillage.com for more.
At 9:01 a.m., as United 175 continues its rapid descent into lower Manhattan, New York Center alerts another nearby air traffic facility responsible for low-flying aircraft.
I'm just at a 9,500, 9,000 now. Do you know who he is? We don't know who he is. We're just picking him up now. All right, heads up, man. It looks like another one. All right.
As it actually moves in toward the Trade Center, controllers at Newark Airport see it, and it's seen by, well, this is the flight that was seen by the world.
As I'm watching all of this unfold, and especially towards the last minute and a half, I am getting very frightened, scared. The fear was just tremendous.
Peter Hansen calls his father back.
He said, I think that they're planning on crashing this plane into a building, maybe in Chicago, someplace like that. And I said, no, they don't do that, Peter. You know, they land and they demand ransom and so forth. He said, I don't think so, Dad. He said, but don't worry about it. He said, because don't worry about it, because if it happens, it'll be quick.
One of the controllers started counting out the altitudes, and he says, my God, he's going down at 8,000 feet a minute. Now it's 10,000 feet a minute. And he counted off 8, 6, 4, and he says, my God, he's in the ground on the next hit. And somebody said, no, that's the Trade Center right there.
At 9:03 a.m., on the 77th floor of the South Tower, Florence Jones, who works for Baseline Financial, looks out the window.
I could see straight across the floor, which was all glass. And I could not figure out, on a bright, sunny, cloudless day, what this black thing was that was approaching the building.
4 floors above Florence, Stanley Premnath, a loan officer with Fuji Bank, is in his office on the 81st floor.
And for no apparent reason, I just raised my head, watching towards the harbor, the Statue of Liberty, and what I saw was a giant aircraft come in eye contact, eye level towards me. I dropped the phone, screamed, and for no apparent reason, I don't know why I said this, Lord, I can't do this, you take over.
The passengers right at the end were just looking at buildings, just screaming by at the speeds they were going. It must have just been a blur.
The hijacker who was piloting the plane seemed to be having some problem keeping it on a straight course for the South Tower.
And at the last minute, he had tilted the plane to make sure he caught it. I mean, maybe he was afraid he was going to miss it and just get with the wing.
It had to be a coordinated turn to get that jet back in position. If he hadn't made that correction, he would have either missed the building altogether or just knocked his left wing off as he went by. But what he did was start the turn. We saw the end result of it.
If you were on the left-hand side of that airplane, you saw those trade centers coming right up, and then felt that last sudden turn. You knew you were going in.
At 9:03 a.m., Peter Hansen is still on the phone with his dad.
But the television set was on, and
I turned it on.
And all of a sudden, Peter said, very softly, and said, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." And I think I heard a woman scream, and then nothing. Turned the television, a plane crashed into the World Trade Center, and it was their plane. And so...
And all I could say was, oh, I couldn't scream, couldn't cry, couldn't yell. All I said is, oh no.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
That looks like a second plane.
I did not see a plane go in. That just exploded.
And as we're watching it, the second plane went into the second tower.
And you could see the plane come in just from the right-hand side of the screen. So this looks like it is some sort of a concerted effort to attack the World Trade Center that is underway.
We were just in a state of shock. Everybody just stopped talking. I have never been in the room with the controllers where not one word was said, and not one word was said.
It takes only 17 minutes. 17 minutes between the crash of American Flight 11 and United Flight 175 for everyone to understand what is happening.
That was the critical moment, and I think that's when everybody realized that our country's under attack.
Air Force pilots Duff and Nasty are 100 miles off the coast of Long Island, waiting for confirmation of their target, which they still think is American Flight 11.
Call for bogey up again, trying to get some information. And at that point, they said the second aircraft just hit the World Trade Center. That was news to me. I thought we were still chasing American 11.
See the smoke from the buildings probably 100 miles away because it was a very clear day.
United 175 strikes the 77th through 85th floors of the South Tower, killing all on board and hundreds in the building above or near the impact. Amazingly, there are a few survivors right at the point of impact.
This impact was so great that I got temporarily deaf. Couldn't hear anything. And this song was so loud, so excruciating. It was like steel being ripped against steel.
You could feel this thing being absorbed into the building and realizing that whatever it was, it stopped 4 feet over my head.
And I'm hiding under this desk. in a fetal position. And what I saw was a plane tilted and the bottom wing is hung in my office door 20 feet from where I am. And the wing starts to burn. I couldn't see the rest of the plane. I'm saying to myself, I have to get out of here as fast as possible.
As survivors in the South Tower desperately try to escape, air traffic controllers in New York and Boston are taking drastic measures.
We were ordered to put everybody on the ground because you did not trust anything that was in the air. And you did not know what was going to happen. And some of the controllers saying this is a national emergency. You got to land, don't open your cockpit door for nothing.
Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
The worst thing for me was for 20 minutes watching this plot unfold. We were able to watch the most horrific terrorist act ever done to the United States, and just being able to do nothing but watch it go on.
It was strange because we're watching it, but yet we're kind of detached, you know, from being up in the air, like you said, kind of by ourselves, knowing that there's all that chaos on the ground.
We were going to stay over Manhattan and do whatever we needed to over Manhattan. We didn't, they were not going to pull us off of Manhattan.
I remembered thinking, what's coming next? Is it going to stop at just these 2 buildings, or is there something more going on here?
By 9:55 a.m. in the South Tower, survivors are making their way down, using the only stairwell not destroyed by the impact.
It was very dangerous in the stairwell. Gosh, I think I passed the fireman, and I remembered saying to him, I'm not sure why you're going up there, but be very, very careful. You know, we definitely wished him Godspeed.
We got down to the ground floor. Our skin was, our clothes was drenched. Our shoe was all slushy with water from the sprinkler system. Water was running down the staircase. The only people we saw was the firefighters and cops and the EMS workers.
At 9:59 a.m., firefighters in the South Tower are starting to reach the 78th floor, in time to find other people trapped and alive. But it's too late.
The second building that was hit by the plane has just completely collapsed. The entire building has just collapsed.
The whole side has
The
collapsed?
whole building has collapsed.
The whole building has collapsed?
The building has collapsed.
My God.
Folded down on itself, and it is not there anymore.
10 seconds and it's gone. They actually could measure the impact of that building falling down and the earth. It actually traveled through the ground up hundreds of miles and was registered in seismic devices as far north as Maine. You know, it shook the earth, literally, and it shook our reality.
All I could see was, you know, southern Manhattan just covered in smoke. It took me, until Duff said, I think the tower collapsed.
To see this thing just falling away from me, then I realized what was going on. It's absolutely the sickest feeling I've ever had in a plane.
At 9:59 a.m., just 56 minutes after United Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower, there is nothing but a pile of smoking rubble and twisted debris.
That was the certainty of it, that there could be nothing that could have survived that. When you think of the impact of those planes, you think of the fuel, the fire, you think of everybody in those towers. It just left you no reason to hope at that point.
Oh my God, there it goes!
30 minutes later, the North Tower collapses. Thousands are feared dead or missing, and America is left reeling from the deadliest attack in its history.
Oh, God, there goes the other one. Oh.
Look at it, John. Look at it.
Oh, there goes the other one. Oh, God.
The television images of this plane flying into that building will go down as one of those seminal moments in history. We as a nation, and as a world, frankly, shared the horror of that moment together, live, as it happened. That's never happened before.
It's a day I'll never forget, and I know a lot of my coworkers, probably everybody in this country, will never forget. But that's a day that, like I said, we knew before the world knew.
For Hartling and Bottiglia, who handled Flight 175, their job has never been the same.
Every time an airplane didn't answer, I would jump up. If a code was changed, I would jump up screaming at the supervisor. It is taking a very long time for me to just be able to sit down.
And you continue to press on. It's just because you have to do it. I'm proud to be in air traffic control and very proud of the people that I work with.
Today, the lines of communication between air traffic control and the military have been strengthened. Air traffic controllers are trained to immediately report suspicious aircraft to NORAD, who now regularly have fighter jets on alert in the air. If there is a potential threat, pilots are trained to intercept the aircraft and try to get it to land. Shooting down a hostile aircraft is the last resort. The fighter pilots who scrambled that day to intercept the hijacked planes did not have that option.
We reacted as fast as we could, went as fast as we could, but it just wasn't enough.
There's so many what ifs and what would you have done, and I really don't dwell on them because personally I don't think anything would have changed a whole lot even if we had been 5 or 6 minutes earlier.
The final moments of Flight 175 will continue to haunt all those affected by it, but perhaps none so deeply as the families who lost loved ones.
Every time I look at it and I see that plane coming in, I'm watching my son die.
Bobby didn't know he was on the front lines that morning when he got on Flight 175. I'd have to think that it happened so fast that he wasn't aware until maybe the very last second, which was too late.
I would like to have the world know that Peter, Sue, and Christine are an example of what this country lost that day. One whole family. We shall never forget what happened on September 11, 2001.